Hey folks, how's it going? This is Jabba, and I'm just going to be showing you in this video how to create, build, and run a simple C++ program, um, a traditional program called Hello World, which just prints out the greeting Hello World. And we're going to be doing this using Visual Studio on Windows. Um, So I'm at my home machine right here. This is Windows 7, and I'm going to be using Visual Studio 2015, the Community Edition. Now, the same steps for my students, the same steps should work for Visual Studio 2013 that we've got installed in the labs. Anyway, so here we go. So the first step is, well, how do you start Visual Studio? I'm in Windows 7. Windows 10, which some of you will be using, will have a different interface. But I'm going to go to the Start menu here. I'm just going to type Visual Space Studio. Now, in my case, I'm using 2015. Okay. In your case, if you're in one of the school labs, use or type 2013. Now, what you want to start, you should see a list of various options. You want to start Visual Studio 2015 or 2013. You don't want to start Blend for Visual Studio. You don't want to start any kind of install Visual Studio. It should already be pre-installed for you. So I'm just going to start it by clicking here. Now, I've run this before. If you had not run Visual Studio before, you may get a window, a message asking you to sign in or to create a Microsoft account. You don't actually have to do that. You can just close it using the X in the top right corner of that window and then proceed. You'll also probably be asked to choose a color scheme. I happen to have chosen the light color scheme here. I use the dark color scheme elsewhere sometimes. So if your window looks kind of like a dark gray everywhere that's white here, that's fine. There's no difference. That's just aesthetics. You can change that later. Okay, so here we are inside Visual Studio. Visual Studio is what's called an IDE. It's an integrated development environment. All right, I mean, the basic tools you need to create and run a C++ program are just a text editor, some way for you to input the program text, and a compiler system, a compiler, a linker, programs that turn your program text into something that the machine can actually run. Say on Windows, an exe file, on Mac, a .app file, something like that. Now, Visual Studio and other IDEs like Xcode on Mac or CodeBlocks, they provide a lot of functionality, a lot of helpful features, useful features. But the downside is they're these big, complicated programs. So right now there's just a whole bunch of stuff all over my screen. So I'm just going to try to lead you on a short path to getting a very simple C++ program up and running. And this isn't entirely frivolous. The idea is also just to make sure that you have the right tools installed, that you can run them, and that you're not getting any strange errors. Okay, so it's not so much important in this case to understand all the details of the program I'm going to show you. I mean, that will come later. But we're just trying to enter a simple program, build it, and make sure that at least our tools are working and installed correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create a new project here. Just by the way, here's a list of recent projects I've worked on. So if you close Visual Studio and come back and you're like, hey, where did I save my file? You'll actually probably see it in the list of recent projects. Okay, but for now, we're going to create a new project. Okay. Now, there are many templates. There are many options when creating a new project. What we want to do is create an empty project. So if you don't see this option, empty project, make sure on the left here that under Visual C++, you're on the general item, and then you should see empty project. Now it's just chosen a name for us, project 1, but I want to call it Hello World. Okay, I'm going to go capital H, capital W. Here is by default where it's going to store it. So it's going to make a directory called hello, like a folder, Hello World, under this folder. This may look different for you. Well, no doubt, because your name's not Jabba, but that's where it's storing all the project files. Okay, and so we can leave everything else the same, and we'll just hit OK. After a few moments, we get this. Okay, so again, there's a lot to see here, but let's just focus in on a few basic things. This is called the Solution Explorer. So this is not so much a C++ thing, the idea of a solution or a project. C++ knows about files with C++ code in them. Solutions or projects are something that an IDE, an integrated development environment like Visual Studio, or like CodeBlocks or like Xcode, use to organize your files and to store all the options and the settings that you may have set up for your project. Okay, so what we want to do is just add a file. So on this source files line here, I'm going to right click, which brings up this menu. And I'll go add, new item. Okay, and here under Visual C++, C++ file. I've selected this by left clicking on it. Again, it's suggested a default name, source.cpp. I don't like that. I'm going to call it hello. So HELLO dot CPP. No spaces, all lowercase. It doesn't actually matter what you call this here. There are many options for that. This is what I want to call it. It might help you if you just name it exactly the same thing. Then that's one last thing to debug if later on there are some problems. Okay, and it shows you where it's going to put that file. So let's hit add. Okay, you saw now this area of the screen changed because this is showing us a view of that file, hello.cpp. You'll see there's a tab here. If you're used to using multiple tabs in a browser, it's the same idea. We only have one source file right now, one file that we're going to enter program code into. But a project could have one file, it could have 10 files, it could have hundreds of files. Okay, and the ones you have open, you'll see as different tabs along here. All right, so now I'm going to enter some code. Again, what's important is not so much that you understand every line. I mean, this is just the very first program you're writing. I'm going to make some comments about it, but for now, I mean, just copy exactly what I'm doing. And really, as you know, for me, for my students, the rest of the course is about what this means. If you're at home on your own learning, I mean, this is something that you will research and you'll learn more about. But my goal, again, here is not necessarily to walk you through the code, but just to have a minimal program that you can build, run, and then that proves that your setup is correct, basically. And then you can proceed, you know, from there. Okay, so this kind of number sign, include, space. Now, as I type, I'm going to type a less than symbol, and look what happens. Okay, I typed less than, but Visual Studio automatically put in the greater than, and it's showing this drop down. This is, I mean, depending on the IDE, the system you're using, it's called autocomplete. I think Microsoft calls this IntelliSense. But it's basically suggesting things I might want to put in there. So it has a little bit of smarts. I actually want something called IOStream. If I want to choose an option that's highlighted here, I can hit Tab. If I want to cancel, I can hit Escape. Okay? Why did it put in the greater than sign, this closing angle bracket, this right angle bracket, when I type the left? You know, there are all kinds of rules you're going to learn about how to write C++ code. Essentially, like grammar, what are you allowed to write? What is a valid statement and what is not? But one common pattern is that you have matching quotes, you have matching brackets, matching parentheses, typically, you know, to the left and to the right of something that's contained within them. So we can say somehow that this IOStream text is contained within these angle brackets. A common source of errors is where you type the left thing, you might type this here, and you forget to do this. So the IDE is just being helpful. It knows that if you type the left angle bracket, you're going to eventually be doing this. So it actually just did that for me automatically. Okay, so next, using namespace std, semicolon. I'm going to say int space main, open parentheses. And again, see, I just typed the open parentheses, the left parenthesis, and the editor, the IDE automatically put in the right parenthesis because these have to balance, they have to match. You'll see this happen again. I'm going to type a brace. This is right above the square bracket. So, and then it entered the closing brace for me. So int main. Now we're going to print our message. The way we do that, cout, two left brackets, hello world, exclamation mark. And again, I don't have to type the closing, the right double quote. They put that in for me automatically. Endel, semicolon. Okay. I'll also put this here. Whoops, return 0. Now, notice here that there's a little, well, actually a couple of things. One, if I hover the mouse, I'm not clicking anything, I'm just moving the mouse and leaving it stationary over the tab with the file name. This little tip pops up, which shows me the actual file, where it is on my disk drive, user data, Java, my documents, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's somewhat useful. But the other thing here is, see this? There's a little asterisk here, a little star. Okay. What this means is this file is not saved. I've typed the stuff in. I've not saved it yet. It's not on my disk yet. Okay. So as an experienced programmer, I basically have developed almost a tick where I will save a file every few seconds. Okay. How do you save a file? Well, you can click on this icon that looks like a disk. Actually, many of you may be too young to know what this is. This is it's called a floppy disk, although this was the later versions which actually had hard casing on them. But it means save. You could also go File, Save hello.cpp here. And you'll notice it says, oh, CTRL plus S. That means hold down Control and then hold down S. That's a quick way of doing it without leaving the keyboard. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold down Control. I'm going to hit S. I release them. Now this file is saved. I mean, that's common to a lot of Windows apps. In Mac, it's usually Command S. But my point is just that as a beginning programmer, you'll often type a bunch of stuff. You'll go to build the program. You'll see that certain errors you thought you fixed, are still coming up. You're like, well, didn't I just fix that a few seconds ago? Maybe you didn't save the file. Okay, that's just something to watch out for. Maybe you typed all this stuff. Maybe you didn't save the file. Also, machines do crash. Power goes out. So you don't want to be sitting there typing for half an hour and then lose a bunch of work. So it's become certainly automatic and unconscious for me. I'm just sitting here, I've got my pinky on Control, I've got my middle finger on S, and just every so often I'm hitting Control S, Control S, Control S. I would say like a couple of times a minute at least. Okay. This is a complete C++ program. This should build, it should run, and it should print out hello, world. So let's try that. Now, what do we mean by build? There are a bunch of steps. I'm not going to go into them in detail. There are things like pre-processing, compilation, linking. That's, again, the point is, this is a file with some text in it. It's text that I typed in it. The computer can't actually run this. This is not a program. This is the source, the text for a program. So Visual Studio, Xcode, code blocks, whatever you're using, it has to take this, figure out, is it actually C++, or did I make some grammar mistake, and then convert that into something that the computer can actually run. Now, in Visual Studio, we're going to go to the Build menu here, and we're going to say Build Solution. Okay. So it gives you a bit of a status update here, progress report, and then finally, build, 1 succeeded, 0 failed. Hey, great. Okay, so we succeeded. If you don't get that, you may get here, instead of the output window, you might have an error list. So that means you might have mistyped something. I mean, if you type this in exactly as it is, here, you should get the same result. If, for instance, I'm going to put an intentional error in this program. I'm going to delete this here. Okay, I get some kind of squiggles here, almost like a spell check. But let's try to build it. Build solution. Uh-oh. Error list. New line in constant. Some of these errors, it's going to take time and experience for you to figure out what these mean, to learn what they mean. But this one's fairly specific. Missing closing quote. Let's go over here. It's in hello.cpp on line 6. Let's go to line 6. I'm actually not showing line numbers right now. You can see there's some options to show line numbers on the left. I don't have that enabled right now, but you can at least see which line you're on. If you look down here, it'll show you which line, which column you're on. Okay, so as I move up, the first line number is 1. As I go down, they increase. So let's go to line, we can actually just double click here. Double click on there, it takes you right there. So it says missing closing quote. Oh, okay, good. I make the change, I hit save, build solution. Okay, we're back to happy days. No errors, output, 1 succeeded, 0 failed, great. Okay, now this hasn't run the program. This has created an application. It's created an executable, helloworld.exe, in this folder. Okay, it's created a program, helloworld.exe, which we can now run. We could just go here in Explorer and run it by double-clicking it, but this is an integrated development environment. If we run the program from the development environment, we can do some interesting things with it. So let's just go debug, start debugging. This is going to run the program, but it's going to run the program from this development environment. So here we go. Whoop. Hey, what happened? So we wanted to print out hello world, but I just saw this kind of black window appear and then disappear. What was that all about? Well, computers are fast. So it prints out hello world. It gets to the end of the program. You can think of it going line by line. So imagine the program starting here, doing this, doing this, doing this, and then it's done. So basically it just opens a window, prints hello world, closes it, and it's gone. It's done. Too fast for us to see, really. That's only because we're running it from Visual Studio. There are other ways to run the program where we would just see the output and the window would stay open. I'm not going to describe that too much right now. I don't want to go into too much detail on that. But if you know what the command line is, if you know what the command prompt is, if you know what the terminal window is, if you were running the program for the terminal window or the command prompt, it would print this out and you would see it because the window wouldn't close. So we're going to do a little trick. I guess you could call this a hack. I'm going to put some comments in here. I'm going to put a little note. This // makes a comment. It's something that is not for the computer, it's for the programmer, somebody looking at this code. This is basically ignored. Everything until the end of the line from // is ignored. But I can put a comment saying hack, keep the window open so that we can see what was printed. Okay, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to just ask for the user to input something. So I'm just going to do this without explaining it. But this line here, what this is doing is it's asking for some input. So basically, the window's going to stay open until you type something and hit enter. So keep, let's just say here, program will wait for input until user enters, I'll say a number, and hits enter. Okay. I automatically just hit Control S just now. I didn't go to any of these icons. It's almost like I type a line and then I'm basically automatically hitting Control S. Okay, so let's build solution. Okay, no errors, that worked, great. And now let's run it again. Debug, start debugging. Oh, okay, here's that window. Now, okay, if you're running in Visual Studio, I'm using Visual Studio 2015 Community Edition, which is free download. If you're using Visual Studio 2013 Pro, which we have installed in most of the labs, you won't see this stuff over here, I believe. But you don't need this right now. These are some new features that are interesting but not required. Anyway, so we see, look, I said print out hello world. I mean, I'm telling you that. I don't expect you to understand all of this yet. But essentially, I said do something with hello world, print it out, and there we see it. Okay. And now it's waiting for input. So let me just type 42, and as soon as I hit enter, it's going to have read that input, and it's going to keep going through the program, and that's the end of the program. So we expect this just to close down and stop. All right. So we've just written the classic hello world program. It's traditional when learning a new language, or when basically setting up your compilers and tools on a new system. It's traditional to basically write a program that prints out hello, world. And it's not totally frivolous, because if you get that working, what it tells you is, oh, okay, C++ is properly installed, Visual Studio is installed correctly. I can now, I've got a baseline. I can make some programs. All right, cool. Thanks for watching. Hope that helps. I'm certainly going to go into more detail on different topics later. But again, the goal here is just to get you up and running with Visual Studio on Windows. All right.